In a quiet village, a mysterious letter slips under Miss Marple's door, warning of a crime at the haunted Grantham Manor. When a journalist is found stabbed in a locked room, then another murder follows. The clever old lady dives into a deadly puzzle. Armed with a hidden locket, secret journals, and her sharp mind, she uncovers the killer's dark past tied to love and betrayal. Can Miss Marple outsmart a murderer who's watching her every move? Chapter 1. The letter from St. Mary Mead. The village of St. Mary Mead was as quiet as a Sunday morning, with its neat little cottages and tidy gardens. Birds chirped in the hedges, and the air smelled of fresh-cut grass. Miss Jane Marple, a small, white-haired lady with sharp blue eyes, sat in her cozy parlor. Her knitting needles clicked softly, making a scarf for the church sale. She liked the rhythm of it. Knit, pearl, like a puzzle coming together. And puzzles were her specialty, though not the kind you found in books. Miss Marple solved mysteries, the sort that made people whisper and lock their doors at night. It was a Tuesday, just past dawn, when something odd happened. A letter slid under her front door, scraping against the wood. Miss Marple paused, her needles still. She wasn't expecting mail. The postman didn't come until 10, and he always knocked. Curious, she set her knitting on the table and shuffled to the door. Her slippers soft on the polished floor. The letter was plain, no envelope, just a single sheet folded in half. She picked it up, her fingers brushing the rough paper. A faint smell hit her nose, lavender, like the soap her aunt used to love. She opened it carefully, her eyes narrowing at the jagged handwriting. The words were short and sharp, like a knife's edge. A crime will happen at Grantham Manor. Only you can stop it. But watch out. Not alone, no name, no address, nothing else. Miss Marple read it again, her mind already turning. Grantham Manor was an old, crumbling house a few towns away, empty for years. People said it was cursed, full of ghosts and secrets. She didn't believe in ghosts, but secrets. Those were real, and they often hid in dark places like that manor. She sat back in her armchair, the letter in her lap. The fire crackled in the hearth, sending shadows dancing on the walls. Who sent this? And why her? St. Mary Mead was full of gossip, but nobody knew about her knack for solving crimes except a few close friends. Someone was watching her, someone who knew more than they should. Miss Marple tapped the letter against her knee. She could ignore it, toss it in the fire, and go back to her knitting. But that wasn't her way. A challenge like this was like a loose thread in a sweater. Pull it, and the whole thing might unravel. She smiled faintly. Whoever wrote this thought they could scare her. They didn't know Jane Marple. By 8 o'clock, she'd made up her mind. She'd go to Grantham Manor and see what was what. She packed a small bag, a change of clothes, her knitting, a notebook, and a pen. Simple things, but enough. She didn't need fancy gadgets to solve a mystery, just her eyes and her brain. She stepped outside, locking her door. The village was waking up. Mrs. Price, her neighbor, waved from her garden, a basket of carrots in her arm. Off somewhere, Miss Marple, she called. Just a little trip, Miss Marple said, her voice cheerful. She didn't mention the letter. No need to stir up talk. People in St. Mary Mead loved a story, and this one wasn't ready to be told. The walk to the train station was short, down a lane lined with apple trees. The air was cool, and a breeze tugged at her hat. She bought a ticket to Ashford, the town closest to Grantham Manor. The station was quiet. Just a few farmers waiting with their sacks of potatoes. Miss Marple sat on a bench, the letter tucked in her pocket. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. The words were burned in her mind. The train chugged in, puffing steam. She climbed aboard, finding a seat by the window. The carriage was half empty, with a young man reading a newspaper and an older woman dozing across from her. Miss Marple watched the countryside roll by, green fields, stone walls, cows grazing lazily. But her thoughts were on the manor, Grantham. Manor had a bad name, even in St. Mary Mead, 30 years ago. It was the grandest house for miles, owned by Edward Grantham and his wife Lillian. They threw parties that lit up the night with music and laughter spilling from the windows. Then it all stopped. Lillian died, some said an accident. Others whispered murder. Edward vanished soon after, and the manor was left to rot. People claimed they saw lights in the windows or heard cries in the dark. Miss Marple didn't care for such tales, but she knew every story had a grain of truth. Something happened in that house, and someone wanted her to dig it up. The train rattled on, and she let her mind wander. The letter's warning stuck with her. You're not alone. Was someone else after the same secret? Or was the writer watching her even now? She glanced at the other passengers. The young man turned a page, his face hidden by the paper. The older woman snored softly, her head against the window. Nothing suspicious, but Miss Marple never took things at face value. People hid things, even in plain sight. Ashford Station was busier than St. Mary Mead's. With carts creaking and voices calling, Miss Marple stepped off the train, her bag in hand. The town was small but lively, with shops selling bread and boots and a market square where women haggled over apples. She asked a boy, sweeping the platform for directions to Grantham Manor. "It's up the hill, miss," he said, pointing. "But you don't want to go there. It's creepy." She smiled. "Thank you, dear. I'll be fine." The walk to the manor took her through Ashford's outskirts, where houses gave way to fields and then to a winding path. The air grew heavier, like a storm was coming, though the sky was clear. She saw the manor before she reached it. It's tall, towers poking through the trees like broken teeth. Ivy clung to its stone walls, and the windows were dark, some cracked. It looked like a place that had forgotten how to live. That, as she got closer, she saw people pleased by their uniforms standing at the manor's gates. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze, blocking the entrance. Something had happened. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she kept her face calm. She approached a young officer, his cap slightly crooked. "Good morning," she said politely. "Might I ask what's going on?" The officer frowned. "No one's allowed in, ma'am. There's been an incident." An incident. She tilted her head, looking frail and harmless. People often told her things when she looked like that. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "A woman was found dead inside. Murder, they think." Miss Marple's eyes widened, but inside her mind was racing. The letter had said a crime will happen, but it seemed the crime was already done. Had she been too late, or was this just the start? "Who's in charge?" she asked. "Inspector Harrow," the officer said, nodding toward a tall man in a dark coat. Barking orders near the manor's door. "Thank you," she said, and moved closer, keeping to the edge of the crowd. That had gathered locals, mostly whispering and staring. She listened, catching bits of talk found in the library. Stabbed, no one saw a thing. Her fingers tightened on her bag. This was no simple crime. A locked manor, a dead woman, and a letter pulling her hear it was a puzzle, and a dangerous one. She studied Inspector Harrow. He was middle-aged, with a square jaw and a scowl that said he didn't like surprises. He'd probably dismiss her as a nosy old lady, but that was fine. People underestimated her, and that was her advantage. She waited until he stepped away from the others, then approached. "Inspector Harrow," she said, her voice soft but clear. He turned, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" "Jane Marple, from St. Mary Mead. I heard about the trouble here, and thought I might help." "Help?" he snorted. "This isn't a knitting circle, ma'am. It's a murder investigation." "I understand," she said, unfazed. "But I've helped with such things before. Perhaps I could just look around." Harrow stared, then shook his head. "No civilians." "Go home, Miss Marple." She nodded, as if agreeing, but she didn't leave. She stepped back, blending into the crowd, her eyes scanning the manor. The police were focused on the front, but she noticed a side path, half hidden by bushes leading to the back. It might be nothing, but it was a start. She slipped away, moving slowly so no one would notice. The path was overgrown, thorns snagging her coat, but she pressed on. It led to a rusted gate, slightly ajar. Beyond it was the manor's garden, wild and tangled with roses that hadn't been pruned in years. She paused, catching her breath. The air here felt different, heavy with secrets. Then she saw a footprint in the mud, fresh and clear. Someone had been here recently, someone who didn't want to be seen. She bent down, careful not to touch it. The print was large, a man's boot, she guessed. Her mind flicked back to the letter. "You're not alone." Was this the writer's mark or someone else's? She straightened, her heart steady despite the chill in her bones. The manor loomed above, its windows like eyes watching her. She wasn't welcome here, but she wasn't leaving. A woman was dead, and someone thought they could outsmart Jane Marple. They were wrong. She turned back to the path, planning her next move. She'd find a place to stay in Ashford, somewhere she could listen and learn. The inn was her best bet. Inns were full of gossip, and gossip was as good as clues. She'd talk to the locals, piece together the manor's story, and figure out who sent that letter. And she'd do it quietly, the way she always did. Like a spider spinning a web dot as she walked back to town, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows. The letter felt heavy in her pocket, its words echoing in her mind. This was her toughest case, yet she could feel it. But Miss Marple didn't back down from puzzles, no matter how dark. She'd solve this one, or her name wasn't Jane Marple. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Manor. The train from St. Mary Mead rattled into Ashford as the sky turned bruised purple, heavy with clouds. Miss Jane Marple stepped onto the platform, her small bag in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the bustling station. The air smelled of coal and damp earth, and voices hummed around her, farmers haggling, children laughing, a porter shouting about lost luggage. She adjusted her hat, a plain gray one that made her look like any old lady, started toward Grantham Manor, the anonymous letter still tucked in her pocket. Weighed on her mind. A crime will happen at Grantham Manor. Only you can stop it. But watch out, you're not alone. Its lavender scent lingered, a clue as faint as a whisper. Ashford was a busy town, bigger than St. Mary Mead, with cobblestone streets and shops selling everything from bread to boots. Miss Marple asked a newsboy for directions to the manor. "Up the hill, past the old oak," he said, eyeing her curiously. "But it's a bad place, miss. Folks say it's haunted." She thanked him with a smile, untroubled by ghost stories. She didn't believe in spirits, but she knew houses like Grantham Manor held secrets, human ones, dark and dangerous. The path to the manor wound through fields, then thickened with trees. The air grew colder and the manor appeared, its jagged towers clawing at the sky. Ivy choked its gray stone walls, and broken windows stared like empty eyes. It was worse than she'd imagined, a place that seemed to swallow light. As she neared, she saw yellow police tape flapping across the iron gates. A crowd of locals huddled nearby, whispering. Uniformed officers stood guard, their faces grim. Something bad had happened, and Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression stayed calm. She approached a young constable, his cap tilted nervously. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice gentle. "What's all this about?" He glanced at her, unsure. "Murder, ma'am?" "A woman was found dead inside. No one's allowed in. Murder." She widened her eyes, looking frail and harmless, a trick that often loosened tongues. "How dreadful. Who was she?" "Clara Vane," he said, lowering his voice. "A writer, they say. Stabbed in the library. Door was locked from the inside." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already turning. The letter had warned of a crime, but this one was done. Was she too late, or was more coming? "Who's in charge?" she asked. "Inspector Harrow," the constable said. pointing to a tall man in a dark coat, barking orders near the manor's entrance. Harrow looked like he chewed nails for breakfast, his jaw square and his eyes hard. She thanked the constable and moved closer, keeping to the crowd's edge. She listened to the whispers. Clara was poking into the manor's past. No weapon found. How'd the killer get out? Each word was a puzzle piece, and Miss Marple stored them carefully. She spotted Harrow breaking away from his men, and stepped forward. "Inspector Harrow," she said, her tone polite but firm. He turned, frowning. "Who's this?" "Jane Marple, from St. Mary Mead. I heard about the trouble and thought I might help." "Help?" He laughed, short and sharp. "This is police work, not a tea party. Go home, lady," she smiled, unruffled. "Of course, Inspector. I'll stay out of your way." But she didn't leave. She drifted back to the crowd, her eyes on the manor. The police were busy at the front, but she noticed a narrow path winding around the side, half hidden by thorny bushes. It called to her, quiet but insistent. Slipping away, she followed the path, her steps slow to avoid notice. The bushes scratched her coat, but she pressed on, her walking stick steadying her. The path led to a rusted gate creaking in the wind. Beyond it was the manor's back garden, a jungle of weeds and wild roses. She paused, catching her breath. The air felt thick, like the manor was watching her. Then she saw footprints, fresh ones, pressed deep in the mud. They were big, a man's. Boots leading toward the manor's back door. Her pulse jumped, but she stayed calm. Someone had been here, someone who didn't use the main gate. She crouched, studying the prints without touching them. The letter's warning echoed. "You're not alone." Was this the killer's trail, or the letter writer's? Maybe both. She stood, her eyes tracing the manor's walls. The back door was old, its paint peeling, but it looked recently used. Scratches marked the lock. She didn't try it. The police would check it soon enough, and she didn't need to be caught trespassing. Instead, she turned to the garden, its roses tangled and sharp. Clara Vane had been a writer, digging into the manor's history. Maybe she'd found something here, something worth killing for. Miss Marple walked deeper into the garden, her stick poking at the ground. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she trusted her instincts. The manor loomed behind her, its windows dark. A chill ran through her, not from the cold, but from the feeling of eyes on her back. She glanced over her shoulder, nothing but shadows. Still she hurried, her steps careful but quick. Back in Ashford, she found the Black Swan Inn, a creaky old place with a sign swinging in the breeze. The innkeeper, a round woman named Mrs. Dodd, greeted her warmly. "Room for the night, dear?" she asked, wiping her hands on an apron. "Yes, please," Miss Marple said, signing the guest book. "Quiet town, isn't it? Except for the trouble at the manor." Mrs. Dodd's eyes lit up, eager for gossip. "Oh, it's awful." Poor Clara. Vane? Stabbed like that? She was staying here, asking all sorts of questions about the Granthams. Miss Marple leaned closer, her face curious. The Granthams, the old owners. Mrs. Dodd said, lowering her voice. "Edward and Lillian lived in that manor years ago. Lillian died, fell down the stairs, they said, but some thought it was murder. Edward disappeared after. Folks say he's still there, a ghost wandering the halls." Miss Marple nodded, hiding her interest. "And Clara was writing about them." "She was," Mrs. Dodd said. "Had a notebook full of scribbles. Asked me about strange lights in the manor at night, footsteps too. I told her to leave it alone, but she wouldn't listen." "Thank you," Miss Marple said, her mind filing every word. Clara's notebook, where was it now? And those lights? And footsteps, ghost stories, or something real? Her room was small but clean, with a lumpy bed and a window overlooking the street. She unpacked her bag, setting her knitting on the table. The letter sat beside it, its jagged words taunting. She didn't touch it. Instead, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Clara Vane, journalist, stabbed in locked library." Investigating Grantham's. Notebook. Footprints at back door. Lights and footsteps reported. Each note was a thread, and she'd weave them together. Soon, that evening, she sat in the inn's dining room, a plate of shepherd's pie untouched. The room was lively, filled with locals talking about the murder. She listened, her ears sharp. A farmer mentioned Clara's questions about a key she was looking for. A barmaid whispered about a man seen near the manor last week, a stranger with a scar. Miss Marple jotted it all down, her pen quick and quiet, as the clock struck 9. A shout came from outside. She hurried to the window, joining the crowd gathering in the street. A policeman ran by, his face pale. Another body. Someone yelled. Miss Marple's stomach twisted. She slipped on her coat and followed, blending into the shadows. The manor was lit by lanterns now, police swarming like ants. She stayed back, watching. Inspector Harrow stood by the gates, his face darker than before. A body lay in the courtyard, covered with a sheet. Whispers spread. It's Harrow's deputy. Strangled. No one saw a thing. Miss Marple's heart sank. 2 deaths in one day, both at the manor. The killer was bold, striking under the police's nose. She thought of the footprints, the letter, Clara's notebook. This wasn't random. Someone was tying up loose ends, and fast. She returned to the inn, her mind racing. In her room, she sat by the lamp, her notebook open. Letters, words burned in her head. Only you can stop it. But stop what? More murders. Or something bigger, buried in the manor's past. She wrote, second victim, deputy, strangled in courtyard, killer active, unafraid. Clara's notebook key, stranger with scar. She closed the notebook, her knitting untouched. The manor was a trap, and she'd walked right into it. But Jane Marple didn't run from traps. She'd find Clara's notebook, follow those footprints, and unmask the killer. The letter writer thought they could outsmart her, but they didn't. Know her strength, her quiet, stubborn mind, sharper than any knife. As she blew out the lamp, a creak came from the hall. She froze, listening. Nothing followed, but she locked her door just in case. The manor's shadows were long, and they reached even here. Tomorrow, she'd go back to the garden, the back door, anywhere the truth hid. This puzzle was her toughest. But she'd solve it, piece by piece, or her name wasn't Jane Marple. Chapter 3. The Riddle of the Roses. Dawn broke over Ashford. Painting the sky pink, but Miss Jane Marple was already awake. She sat by her window at the Black Swan Inn, her small notebook open, her pen scratching quietly. The murders at Grantham. Manor weighed on her mind. Clara Vane, stabbed in a locked library. And now Inspector Harrow's deputy, strangled in the courtyard. 2 deaths in a day, bold and brutal. The anonymous letter in her pocket, with its jagged handwriting in lavender. Scent had warned her. A crime will happen at Grantham Manor. Only you can stop it. But watch out, you're not alone. She wasn't too late yet, but the killer was moving fast. And she needed answers. Her notes from last night were neat but urgent. Clara Vane, journalist, investigating Grantham's. Notebook mentioned a key. Footprints by back door, man's. Boots, stranger with scars seen near manor. Deputies, death killer, fearless. Clara's notebook was her best lead. Mrs. Dodd, the innkeeper, said Clara carried it everywhere, scribbling about the manor's past. It held clues to why she died. Miss Marple had to find it. But first, she'd check the manor's rose garden. Something about it pulled her the wild, thorny mess she'd seen yesterday. Hiding secrets as old as the house. She dressed quickly, choosing a plain brown coat and sturdy shoes. Her walking stick leaned by the door, ready for uneven ground. She tucked her notebook and the letter into her pocket, locked her room, and slipped downstairs. The inn was quiet, only a maid sweeping the dining room. Miss Marple left a note for Mrs. Dodd saying she'd be back by noon, and stepped into the cool morning. Ashford's streets were empty, shops still shuttered. The path to Grantham Manor was familiar now, winding through fields and up the hill. The manor loomed ahead, its towers sharp against the dawn. Police tape still blocked the gates, but fewer officers were around, most likely exhausted from last night's chaos. A single constable stood watch, yawning. Miss Marple didn't approach him. She wasn't welcome here, not after Inspector Harrow's sharp words yesterday. This is police work, not a tea party. She'd work around him, quiet as a shadow. She took the side path she'd found before, hidden by thorny bushes. It led to the rusted gate and the manor's back garden. The gate creaked as she pushed it open, but no one came. The garden was a tangle of roses, their petals faded, their stems thick with thorns. Weeds choked the paths, and a faint mist hung low, making the air heavy. Miss Marple gripped her stick, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. Clara's notebook had mentioned a key, and Mrs. Dodd said Clara asked about the garden. There was a clue here, she'd find it. She moved slowly, her shoes sinking into soft earth. The roses scratched at her coat, but she ignored them. Her mind was on Clara. Why? Was she poking into the Grantham's past? Edward and Lillian Grantham, the manor's last owners, were long gone. Lillian died 30 years ago, a fall down the stairs that some called murder. Edward vanished soon after, leaving rumors of ghosts and curses. Clara, a journalist, was writing a book about it. Had she found something dangerous enough to kill for? Miss Marple stopped at a crumbling fountain, its basin cracked and dry. She circled it, looking for anything odd, a hidden box, a marked stone. Nothing. She pressed deeper, her stick probing the ground. The garden was bigger than it looked, a maze of twisting paths and overgrown beds. Her legs ached, but she didn't stop. Puzzles didn't solve themselves, and she'd faced worse than a few thorns. Then she saw at a statue, half hidden by vines. It was a stone angel, its face sad, one hand pointing down. The base was uneven, tilted like someone had moved it. Her heart quickened. She knelt, ignoring the damp seeping through her skirt, and brushed dirt from the base. The soil was loose, freshly disturbed. She dug with her hands, careful but quick, till her fingers hit something hard, as a small metal box, rusted but intact. She pulled it free, her breath catching. The box was locked, no bigger than a book, with a faint engraving, E.G. Edward Grantham. She glanced around, suddenly aware of how alone she was. The manor's windows stared down, dark and silent. She slipped the box into her bag, her mind racing. This could be Clara's key, or something older tied to the Grantham secrets. Either way, it was a start. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and retraced her steps. The garden felt different now, its shadows sharper. A twig snapped behind her, and she froze, her grip tightening on her stick. She turned slowly, nothing but roses and mist. Still, her skin prickled. The letter's warning rang in her head. You're not alone. She hurried to the gate, her steps steady despite the unease in her chest, back in Ashford. She returned to the inn, the box heavy in her bag. Mrs. Dodd was in the dining room, setting out bread and tea. You're back early, dear, she said, smiling. Find anything at that dreadful manor. Looking, Miss Marple said, her tone light. Did Clara ever mention a metal box? Or something buried? Mrs. Dodd frowned, thinking, not a box. But she was keen on the rose garden. Kept saying there was a secret there. Something about a key. Never said what. Miss Marple nodded, hiding her excitement. Thank you. Dear, I'll be in my room if you need me. Upstairs, she locked her door and set the box on the table. Her knitting lay untouched, her focus sharp. She examined the box, its lock small but stubborn. She didn't have a key, but she'd opened. Worse, with a hairpin. She fetched one from her bag, bending it carefully, and worked at the lock. It was slow, her fingers weren't as nimble as they once were, but after a few minutes, it clicked open. Inside was a locket, silver and old, with E.G. etched on it. She opened it gently. A photograph stared back, a man and a woman, both young, both serious. The man had sharp eyes and a thin scar on his cheek. The woman looked fragile, her smile forced. Miss Marple's heart sank. Was this Edward and Lillian Grantham? Or someone else tied to their story? She closed the locket, her mind filing the details. Metal box in rose garden. Locket with E.G. photo of man with scar. Woman unknown. She leaned back, her eyes on the ceiling. Clara had been close to something big, something worth hiding in the ground. The footprints by the back door, the stranger with a scar, the locket, they were pieces of the same puzzle. But the killer was out there, watching, striking. The deputy's death proved they didn't care who got in their way. She opened her notebook, adding box found under Angel's statue. Locket with E.G. Photo of man with scar. Clara's key. Ties to Grantham's. Killer's still active. She paused, then wrote, "Must find Clara's notebook. If the police had it, she'd need to charm her way to it. If not, it might still be in the manor with the killer." A knock at the door made her jump. Miss Marple. It was Mrs. Dodd. "Lunch is ready. If you're hungry." "Thank you, dear," she called, tucking the locket and box under her knitting. She'd keep them hidden for now. No one needed to know what she'd found. Not yet. Downstairs, the dining room buzzed with locals. Their talk all about the murders. She sat in a corner, her tea steaming, and listened. A shopkeeper mentioned Clara's notebook, seen in her room before she died. A farmer swore he'd seen a man near the manor last night, sneaky-like, with a limp. Miss Marple wrote it. Down notebook in Clara's room. Man with limp near manor. Every whisper was a clue, and she was building a picture, slow but sure. After lunch, she decided to visit the manor again, this time to talk to Inspector Harrow. He didn't like her, but she'd try anyway. She walked the familiar path, the manor's towers glowering under the noon sun. The constable at the gate recognized her and sighed. "Spector's inside," he said, "but he's in a mood." "I'll be quick," she said, smiling. She stepped past the tape, her stick tapping the ground. The manor's front door was open, police moving in and out. She found Harrow in the hall, his face like thunder. "Miss Marple," he growled, "I told you to stay away." "I know, Inspector," she said, her voice soft, "but I heard Clara Vane had a notebook. Did you find it?" His eyes narrowed. "How'd you know about that?" "People talk," she said simply. "It might help you catch the killer." He snorted. "We found it in the library near her body. It's evidence, not your business." "Of course," she said, hiding her frustration. "What did it say?" Harrow glared, but something in her steady gaze made him answer. "Just nonsense scribbles. About keys and roses. Nothing useful." She nodded, her mind racing. Keys and roses. Clara had been on the same trail she was. "Thank you, Inspector. I'll leave you to it." She turned away, her heart pounding. The notebook was with the police, out of reach for now. But the rose garden had given her the locket, and that was enough to keep going. She'd go back tomorrow, check the back door, look for more footprints. The killer was close. She could feel it like a storm waiting to break. As she left the manor, a shadow moved in the garden, too quick to see clearly. She stopped, her breath catching. Nothing followed, but her hand tightened on her stick. The letter was right. She wasn't alone. Someone was watching, waiting. Let them, she thought. Jane Marple didn't scare easy, and she'd solve this puzzle no matter how many shadows chased her. Chapter 4. The hidden room. The morning sun barely touched Ashford, hidden behind thick gray clouds. Miss Jane Marple sat at the Black Swan Inn, her notebook open, her tea growing cold. The murders at Grantham Manor gnawed at her. Clara Vane, stabbed in a locked library, and Inspector Harrow's deputy, strangled in the courtyard. The anonymous letter, with its lavender scent and jagged words, had pulled her here. A crime will happen at Grantham Manor. Only you can stop it. But watch. Out tore not alone. Yesterday's find in the Rose Gardena metal box with a locket marked E.G. and a photo of a scarred man and a sad woman had deepened the puzzle. Clara's notebook, now with the police, held clues about a key and roses. Next, Miss Marple knew the answers were in the manor. And she wasn't waiting for permission to find them. She dressed in her plain coat and sturdy shoes, her walking stick ready. The locket was hidden in her bag, wrapped in a handkerchief. Her notebook listed her leads, Clara's notebookies, roses. Locket with E.G., scarred man, unknown woman, footprints by back door, stranger with scar, man with limp seen near manor, killer bold, strikes fast. The police, led by the gruff Inspector Harrow, had Clara's notebook. But they didn't know about the locket or the footprints. She'd keep those secret until she understood them. She left the inn quietly, nodding to Mrs. Dodd, who was polishing glasses. "Off again, dear?" Mrs. Dodd asked. "Just a walk," Miss Marple said, smiling. No need to stir gossip. The town was on edge. Whispers of murder following her down the street. The path to Grantham Manor was familiar now, winding through fields and up the hill. The manor loomed, its ivy-choked towers dark against the clouds. Police tapes still blocked the gates, but only one constable stood guard, his eyes half closed. Miss Marple didn't approach. Harrow had made it clear she wasn't welcome. This is police work, not a tea party. She'd find another way. She took the side path, hidden by thorny bushes, to the rusted gate she'd used before. It creaked as she slipped through, leading to the wild rose garden. The air was damp, smelling of earth and decay. She paused, checking for new footprints, the ones from yesterday big. A man's boots were still there, but fainter, softened by last night's drizzle. No fresh marks. The killer hadn't returned, or they'd been careful. Her plan was simple: get inside the manor. Clara died in the library, a locked room with no weapon. That wasn't just a crime. It was a challenge. Miss Marple didn't believe in impossible murders. There was a trick, and she'd find it. The back door, scratched and worn, was her best bet. She moved through the garden, her stick steady on the uneven ground, and reached the door. It was old, its lock rusted, but the scratches she'd noticed yesterday looked fresh. Someone had picked it, maybe Clara, maybe the killer. She tested the handle locked. She could try a hairpin, but breaking in was risky with police nearby. Instead, she circled the manor, looking for another way. A broken window caught her eye, low and half hidden by ivy. The glass was jagged, but the frame was wide enough for a small woman like her. She glanced around, no one in sight. Using her stick to clear the worst of the glass, she climbed through, careful not to tear her coat. Her heart raced, but her hands were steady. Jane Marple wasn't above a little trespassing for the truth. Inside, the manor was cold and dim, smelling of dust and mold. She stood in a narrow hall, its wallpaper peeling, portraits staring from the walls. Their eyes seemed to follow her, but she ignored them. She needed the library. Clara's death was the heart of this, and the room might hold answers the police missed. She moved quietly, her shoes soft on the creaky floor. The manor was a maze-long corridors, locked doors, staircases that led nowhere. She passed a ballroom, its chandelier draped in cobwebs, and a dining room with a table set for no one. Finally, she found the library, its double doors slightly ajar. Yellow tape crossed the entrance, but no officers were inside. She ducked under the tape, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The library was huge, with shelves reaching the ceiling, books moldering in rows. A chalk outline marked where Clara's body had been, near a heavy oak desk. The windows were locked, their latches rusted. The door's bolt was on the inside, untouched. Miss Marple stood in the center, turning slowly. A locked room, a stabbed woman, no weapon. How? She started with the desk, its drawers stuffed with old papers, bills, letters, nothing useful. Then she checked the shelves, running her fingers along the spines. Dust coated everything, but one section looked cleaner, like books had been moved. She pulled a few out, revealing a faint seam in the wood behind them. Her pulse jumped. She tapped it hollow, a hidden panel. She pressed, tugged, and twisted until the panel clicked and swung open, revealing a small room. It was barely bigger than a closet, its walls lined with shelves. Journals filled them, their covers worn, and a single photograph hung on the wall, the same scarred man from the locket, older now, standing by a rose bush. Miss Marple's breath caught. This was no coincidence. She took a journal, its pages brittle. The handwriting was neat, signed Edward Grantham. It detailed his life with Lillian, their love, then their fights. He wrote of her lover, Victor Klein, a man he feared. Victor's eyes are cold. He wants her and he'll kill me to get her. The final entry was short. If I die, look to the chandelier. Miss Marple glanced up. The library chandelier hung high, its crystals dull with dust. She dragged a chair beneath it, climbing carefully. Her hands shook, but she reached the chandelier's base, feeling for a hidden catch. Her fingers found a small compartment, and inside was a folded letter. She climbed down, her heart pounding, and opened it. Edward's writing again. Victor killed Lillian. He pushed her down the stairs. It's coming for me next. If you find this, stop him. Miss Marple pocketed the letter, her mind racing. Victor Klein was the key. Clara must have found this room, or something like it, and it got her killed. The locket, the journals, the letter they pointed to a murder 30 years old, still driving someone to kill. Was Victor still alive, hiding in Ashford? Or was someone else protecting his secret? A floorboard creaked outside. She froze, slipping into the hidden room and pulling the panel shut. Footsteps echoed, slow and heavy, a man's boots. They stopped by the desk, then moved to the shelves. Miss Marple held her breath, her back against the wall. Whoever it was, they knew the library well. They tapped the panel as if testing it, then walked away. Silence followed, but she waited, her heart thudding. When she was sure they were gone, she stepped out, her legs shaky. The library looked untouched, but she felt the weight of being watched. She left the manor the way she came, through the broken window, her mind a storm of clues. Hidden room, Edward's journals. Victor Klein killed Lillian, maybe Edward. Letter in chandelier. Someone else was here. He added it to her notebook. When she reached the inn, her hand steady despite the scare. Back in her room, she locked the door and sat by the lamp. The locket, the ladder, and her notes spread before her. Victor Klein was the shadow behind this. His name tied the past to the present. The stranger with a scar, the man with a limp, could one be him? Or was the killer someone new, guarding an old crime? Clara's notebook might say more, but it was with Harrow. She'd try again tomorrow, charm him or find another way. Mrs. Dodd knocked, offering tea. Miss Marple accepted, using the moment to ask, did Clara ever mention a man named Victor? Mrs. Dodd frowned. Not that I recall. She talked about Edward and Lillian, though. Said there was a third person in their story. Someone dangerous. Miss Marple nodded, filing it away. Thank you, dear. Lone again, she wrote. Victor Klein, Lillian's lover, dangerous. Clara knew of him. Is he alive? The puzzle was growing, its pieces sharp. 2 murders, a hidden room, a killer who walked the manor like he owned it. She wasn't safe, not with someone watching her every move. That night, the inn was quiet, but sleep didn't come. She sat by the window, her knitting untouched. The letter's words in her head, stop him. She would, but first, she had to find him. The manor held more secrets. She'd check the back door, the garden, anywhere the truth hid, the killer thought. He was clever, but Jane Marple was cleverer. She'd unravel this, no matter how dark the shadows grew. Chapter 5. The final confrontation, the air in Ashford was thick with tension, like a storm about to break. Miss Jane Marple sat in her room at the Black Swan Inn, her notebook open, her sharp blue eyes tracing her latest clues. The murders at Grantham Manor, Clara Vane, stabbed in a locked library. And Inspector Harrow's deputy, strangled in the courtyard, had shaken the town. The anonymous letter, with its lavender scent and jagged warning, had pulled her into this puzzle. A. Crime will happen at Grantham Manor. Only you can stop it. But watch out, Chore, not alone. Now, with a locket from the rose garden, Edward Grantham's journals from a hidden room, and a letter accusing Victor Klein of murder, she was close to the truth. The killer was bold, striking under the police's nose, and Miss Marple knew. She had to act fast. Her notebook was a map of the case. Clara Vane, journalist, killed for digging into Grantham's. Locket with E.G. Photo of scarred man, sad woman. Footprints by back door, man's boots. Edward's journals, Victor Klein killed Lillian. Maybe Edward. Letter in chandelier. Stop him. Stranger with scar. Man with limp. Seen near manor. Clara's notebook with police mentions keys, roses. Yesterday's scare in the library footsteps. Someone searching proved the killer was watching. She wasn't safe, but Jane Marple didn't run from danger. She solved puzzles, and this one was almost complete. She dressed in her plain coat, her walking stick ready. The locket and Edward's letter were hidden in her bag. Her plan was clear: confront Inspector Harrow with what she knew and force a gathering of suspects. The killer was someone close, someone tied to the manor's past, hiding in plain sight. She'd lay a trap, using the truth to flush them out. She left the inn, nodding to Mrs. Dodd, who was sweeping the porch. "Be careful, dear," Mrs. Dodd said, her eyes worried. "Folks say the manor's cursed." "Thank you," Miss Marple said, smiling. She didn't believe in curses, only in people and their secrets. The path to Grantham Manor was quiet, the town still waking. The manors. Towers loomed, ivy choking its stone walls. Police tape hung loose, and only one constable stood guard, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She approached, her voice gentle. "Good morning," she said. "Is Inspector Harrow inside?" The constable nodded. "He's in the hall, but he's not." Happy. Another night. No leads. "I'll be quick," she said, ducking under the tape. The manor's front door creaked as she entered, the air cold and dusty. Harrow stood in the hall, barking at two officers. His face was lined, his temper short. "Miss Marple," he growled, spotting her. "I told you to stay away." "I know, Inspector," she said calmly, "but I have information about the murders." "Will you hear me out?" He glared, then sighed. 5 minutes. Make it quick." She followed him to the drawing room, its furniture draped in sheets. "Clara Vane was killed because she found proof of an old crime," she began. Edward Grantham's journal's name Victor Klein as Lillian Grantham's killer. Klein likely killed Edward too. Clara's notebook pointed to a key in the rose garden. I found a locket there, with Edward's initials and a photo of a scarred man. The killer is tied to this, and they're still here in Ashford. Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Journals. Locket. Where are they?" "Safe," she said, her tone firm. "But I need your help. Gather everyone connected to the manor, Mrs. Dodd. The historian, Mr. Klein, the groundskeeper, Tom. One of them knows more than they're saying." Harrow snorted. "You're not running this show, lady. Please," she said, her eyes steady. "Do this, and I'll give you the journals and locket. The killer's slipping to murders in 2 days. I'll strike again unless we stop them." He stared, then nodded grudgingly. "Fine. I'll get them here by noon. But if this is a waste of time, you're out." "Thank you," she said, hiding her relief. She left the manor, her heart racing. The trap was set. She'd watch the suspects, catch their lies, and unmask the killer. Back at the inn, she waited, her notebook ready. Mrs. Dodd was nervous, muttering about closing early. Miss Marple patted her hand. It'll be over soon, dear. By noon, Harrow had the suspects in the manor's drawing room. Mrs. Dodd sat, twisting her apron. Mr. Vincent Klein, the historian, clutched a book, his glasses slipping. Tom, the groundskeeper, leaned against the wall, his boots muddy. Harrow stood by the door, arms crossed, while Miss Marple took a chair, her stick across her lap. The room was tense, the air heavy with dust and fear. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice clear. Clara Vane and the deputy were killed to hide an old secret. 30 years ago, Victor Klein murdered Lillian Grantham and likely Edward too. Clara found proof, and it cost her life. "The killer is here, among us." Double quotes, Mrs. Dodd gasped. Tom shifted, his eyes down. Klein adjusted his glasses, his face pale. Miss Marple watched them, her mind sharp. She pulled the locket from her bag, holding it up. This was buried in the rose garden. It's Edward's, with a photo of a scarred man. Clara was close to finding it. Who knew she was looking? No one spoke, but Klein's hand twitched. Miss Marple pressed on. Edward's journal's name, Victor Klein. He was Lillian's lover, a dangerous man. "I found a letter in the library's chandelier. Victor killed her. He's coming for me." The killer silenced Clara to protect Victor's secret. But why the deputy? He saw something, didn't he? Harrow nodded. He was checking. The back door found fresh scratches. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Tom. "Your boots, Tom? They match footprints I saw there." Tom's face reddened. "I checked the grounds. That's my job, of course," she said, her tone mild. "But someone used that door to get in and out unseen." She turned to Klein. "Mr. Klein, you knew Clara. She asked you about the Granthams. Did she mention Victor?" Klein cleared his throat. "She asked about rumors? Yes. I told her what I knew: Lillian's death, Edward's disappearance. Nothing more." Miss Marple nodded, but her eyes stayed on him. His voice was steady, but his fingers gripped his book too tightly. She stood, pacing slowly. "The killer wrote me a letter, daring me to stop them. They thought I'd fail, but they didn't know me. Victor Klein is the key. He's not a ghost, he's alive, or someone's guarding his name." Klein flinched, a small movement, but she saw it. Her heart quickened. She stepped closer, her voice soft but sharp. "Mr. Klein, your name Vincent Klein. Close to Victor Klein, isn't it? And that scar on your hand, Ward wrote about it in his journals. Victor had one just like it." The room froze. Mrs. Dodd gasped. Tom stared. Harrow's hand moved to his belt. Klein's face went white, his glasses slipping. "That's absurd," he stammered. "I'm a historian, not a murderer. And you won't mind answering," Miss Marple said. "Clara trusted you. She shared her notes, didn't she? You knew she was close to the locket, the journals. You followed her to the library, stabbed her, and locked the door with a spare key you'd kept from years ago. The deputy saw you at the back door. So you strangled him? You sent me that letter, thinking you could outsmart me?" Klein's eyes darted to the door. "This is nonsense. You have no proof." "I have the journals," she said. "Your scar, your knowledge of the manor's secrets. Your nervous habit twisting your ring, just like Edward described Victor. You killed Lillian for love, Edward for revenge, and Clara and the deputy to stay hidden. But you couldn't hide from me." Klein lunged, not at her, but for the door. Harrow was faster, grabbing his arm and pinning him down. "Stay put," Harrow growled. Klein struggled, then slumped, his face crumpling. "It's true," he whispered. "I was Victor. Lillian loved me, but Edward wouldn't let her go. I pushed her. It was an accident. Edward found out, so I killed him, hid his body in the cellar. Clara was too close. She found the journals. I had to stop her. The deputy saw me leaving. I didn't want to, but I had no choice." Mrs. Dodd sobbed. Tom swore under his breath. Ms. Marple's face was calm, but her heart ached. So much death for one man's sins. Harrow cuffed Klein, his voice gruff. "You're done, Klein. Move." As Klein was led away, he looked at Miss Marple, his eyes bitter. "You're clever, old lady, but you won't always win." She met his gaze. "I don't need to win. I just need the truth." The room emptied, Harrow barking orders to his men. Miss Marple stayed, her stick tapping the floor. She handed Harrow the locket and letter, keeping the journals for now. "You'll find Edward's body in the cellar," she said. "Clara's notebook will back it up." Harrow nodded, almost respectful. "You're trouble, Miss Marple, but you're good." She smiled faintly. "Just an old lady who listens." Back at the inn, she packed her bag, her knitting untouched. Mrs. Dodd brought tea, her hands shaking. "You saved us," she said. "That monster, I never knew." "No one did," Miss Marple said. "That's how they hide." She caught the evening train to St. Mary Mead, the manor's shadow fading behind her. Her notebook was full, the puzzle solved. Victor Klein, alias Vincent Klein. Killed Lillian, Edward, Clara, deputy. Locket, journals, letter proved it. Caught by his own pride. But the letter's lavender scent lingered in her mind. Klein really sent it? Or was someone else out there pulling strings? As the train rattled through the dark, she leaned back, her eyes on the stars. This case had tested her two murders, a killer who taunted her, secrets buried deep. But she'd won, not with strength, but with her quiet, stubborn mind. Let the next puzzle come. Jane Marple was ready. Epilogue. The quiet return. With Vincent arrested, Ashford breathed easier. Miss Marple returned to St. Mary Mead, her knitting resumed by the fire. The case had tested her like no other, blending old sins with new blood. As she sipped tea, a new letter arrived, its handwriting unfamiliar. "You won this time, Jane, but there's always another game." She smiled faintly. "Let them try."